Hello, everybody. It's nice to be with you again. And as you're getting used to here on the channel, you have both Lucy and I with you in the beginning, anyway. And so we're going to return a little bit to a format that's maybe a little bit more of the way that we've done it in the past, where we'll have Desetu show up and share some information. And then if Lucy wants to expand that in any directions, or if there's questions that have popped up from her, that, of course, I'm aware will reflect questions that other people would have as well. That will happen, of course, like we're used to in the past. So I guess we'll get right into it, and I'll just take a few moments and let my good buddy alter ego of mine uh, move a little more forward. So once again, we would greet you and express, as we frequently do, how much we appreciate our ability to interact with all of you tonight, because, of course, it adds so very much to our exploration as well. So today, as Chuck mentioned to Lucy before we began this session, we've shared our desire to explore an idea and a theme that is common in these types of explorations and moves quite strongly and will continue to move even more strongly to the forefront of your exploration of your existence as your transition, as your shift in consciousness moves deeper into what it will become for all of you. And that idea is your choices and the freedom that you have to make the choices that you would like to make. And the things, maybe we'll call them at the moment, that can play the part of hindering you in making the choices that you would like to make in whatever moment is presenting itself to you at that time. And so, of course, this transition that all of you are within, especially in your new century, but one that began in the 1900s, is one that will allow you a great degree of freedom in your ability to create your experience of reality in a way that we've mentioned and others have mentioned as well, that is even more than you may be able to imagine in this moment, as far as what your freedom of creativity will be, what your ability to explore what it is you can experience and create might be. To get there, however, one of the things that you will need to allow yourself in that context is the freedom to make the choices that you want to make at the times that you want to make those choices for the reasons that you want to make those choices. So the aspects of consciousness that will play a part in you being able to do that are what are termed within your reality beliefs, which are what it is that you believe is true about yourself, about another, about others, about the world that you live in, about situations, about circumstances, all the things that you interact with. And of course, there are many of them, many of them. You will utilize some form of belief each time you make a choice in your life. And this is as a result of the template of this particular physical reality, when this particular physical reality was designed, the template of it included beliefs in this one as a way of coloring your experience here, maybe we'll say. And so beliefs do that. They are strong filters to the types of choices that you make within your reality. And of course, in historical terms, they have been what seemed to be absolute choices. In other words, you had certain choices that everyone just considered those were just the choices that you made, and there were no other choices to be made in certain circumstances and situations. In the time period that you're in right now and moving more deeply into, all of that is beginning to change and will have completely changed by the time that you're done with it. So, if you do simple things, if you decide what food you're going to eat, you would utilize beliefs about why you should or should not eat particular types of foods. You may have beliefs that influence you to eat in ways that, let's say, a vegan may eat, or perhaps a vegetarian may eat, or even individuals who eat meat, or whatever your diet may be. And whatever food you choose at whatever meal may have to do with beliefs that are part of, let's say, the culture that you were raised in. You may eat particular types of foods in breakfast for in the early time of the day, where other cultures don't necessarily pay attention to those types of conventions. Beliefs are part of why you get into certain relationships and who you get into those relationships with, why perhaps you choose to be educated, or if you choose to be educated, and how you choose to be educated. Employment that you choose, why you choose employment, if you choose employment, why you believe you should or should not choose employment. All aspects of your life are influenced by beliefs, and there are many beliefs that influence all of these things. Some are so woven into your experience that you don't even consider them to be beliefs, such as your need to breathe, your need to eat, the fact that there's this thing you call gravity that holds you to this planet, the idea that there is a planet that you exist on, the idea that, and the belief that your body is the primary source of who and what you are. And there are many, many, many others. Some that you can recognize as beliefs, others that you may consider are just a natural and holistic part of what your reality actually is. But they are all beliefs. Because, of course, consciousness, energy, perhaps we'll say also, what you are, expresses itself in infinite ways and is perpetually shifting its expression of itself. And in situations and circumstances like you find yourself within, where you have a reality which is constructed around particular ideas that we utilize to build the reality, shall we say. And when you insert this type of an approach to reality, meaning beliefs, then it seems within the reality that all of existence is approached and is played out as you experience this reality, that things move and are chosen in association with the ideas and the concepts that you have here, which are largely influenced by the beliefs that you hold. So they explain, or they wrap a layer around it, perhaps we'll say, a layer around consciousness, which really has no shape or no form. And as you utilize it and you bring shape and form to it, you use beliefs in this dimension to explain that to yourself about how things are working, why things work the way that they do. And so, because these filters, we'll call them in the moment, are so very prevalent and are actually a foundational component of the experience, the dimension that you find yourselves in, this particular physical dimension, as you move into your ability to have more freedom of choice, to be able to choose the way that you would like to express yourself in your life, you will find yourself interacting with those beliefs that have been utilized, historically speaking, in your civilization for, in terms of time, many, many, many centuries, that you may find may inhibit you in your ability to express yourself in a more, perhaps we'll call it, unencumbered way, a way that feels freer to you, where you can, in fact, choose to do whatever it is you want to do in that moment for whatever reason you want to do it in whatever way you would like to do it. Now, there are some cultures where you may be able to walk around unclothed whenever you want to, but you would probably find yourself in this moment, in most places, feeling pretty inhibited to pull your clothes off, walk out your front door, walk down your street, get into your car, go to the grocery store, walk around the grocery store, collect the items that you wanted, and then come back home. That wouldn't be something that you would probably easily choose to do because you have beliefs that you've worked in for a long time that talk to you about when expressing yourself in that way is correct, shall we say. Okay. And there are many things, of course, that you do in your life that are like that. And the beliefs that affect those actions many times are a little in the background in that regard because you've come to just assume almost in a default way that these are the way that things are done. You don't even really recognize that there's a filter in your experience that has influenced why it is that you do things the way that you do. And so, as all of you move into a more expanded awareness of who and what you are, an awareness and a state of being that allows you that freedom of creativity and exploration in any way that you would like to do it within this particular expression of your dimension, you will find yourself encountering those influences of beliefs as you move in those directions. As you do, you'll recognize what they are, typically through a process of them showing up repetitively. In other words, you will move into expressing yourself in a particular way, and you will find it challenging to be able to do that. And you'll, in that process, become aware of what those challenges are, what beliefs are challenging your ability to be able to express yourself in that way. Whether it's leaving a job and getting a different job, whether it's expressing yourself in a particular way in a relationship, whatever it might happen to be, whether it's eating a different way than you used to eat before. It could be many, many, many things, right? As you choose to do that, you may see that, well, isn't the other way better than this way is? Or shouldn't I do it that way? You may start to think in terms of right, wrong, good, bad, better, worse, which again is a particular type of a belief system, right? Because really, as consciousness, even in this venue, you have the ability to express yourself any way that you want to, but you've utilized these filters to give yourself a particular type of an experience within it to this point. Beyond this point, and actually, even as we speak in this moment, you're altering all of that for yourselves. And you are doing this. Again, there is nobody outside of you that are suggesting that you need to make these changes or are bringing these changes about for you. All of you collectively, as souls, as consciousness, as ever, whatever you would like to say, have chosen to make this shift. And actually, in terms of the simultaneity of time, which many of you may be familiar with, the shift has already occurred for you. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that this version of you, or let's say a version of an individual, because if you're associating with this type of information, more than likely you are on board with participating with this shift in consciousness. But there are others on your planet right now who aren't necessarily choosing to head in that direction. They may be choosing a different type of an experience. They may choose to, in fact, observe this action happening around them, but not participate as fully in it. That might be their choice because, of course, as consciousness, you choose to explore all of what you're exploring in many, many, many different ways. And all of those ways are valid. And so some of you may choose that. Many, many of you will choose to expand your awareness within the experience. And again, this will mean quite a bit of freedom in your ability to create. Freedom that you've only had expressed to you perhaps through literature or perhaps through some of your maybe fantasy or sci-fi movies so far. And freedoms actually that in many instances go beyond that, which we know from this perspective is again hard for you to imagine. But if you think about all the various things that are so common to you now, the ability to utilize a mobile device and do so many things on that device, to connect to people, to talk with an individual and see their image, somebody who maybe lives on the other side of your planet, and do it in only moments, to have individuals explore the depths of your oceans, to have individuals explore space around you to some degree, to have sent out crafts that bring information about the solar system that you've created around you, right? There are so many things that you've done in your lives that are now so very commonplace to you that 200 years ago would seem quite fantastical to those individuals, right? And so what you are moving into is a process that's a lot like that, something that from this vantage point will seem almost more that you can imagine. But once you're in it and once it's actually who and what you are, it will be as commonplace as what your current reality is for you. So, in this, as you go through your day, we would suggest that you approach it in this manner. But of course, it's only our suggestion. We would suggest to attempt to choose those things that make your life as enjoyable for you as it can be, regardless of what it is. And as you do that, as you look around you and you choose, well, I'm more curious about that than I am about that. I feel like I want to investigate that more than I do that. I feel excited about doing that more than I do that. I feel curious about that more than I do about that, or whatever might happen to be, those types of things. Allow yourself to follow those if you can. You may get other pieces of information that show up to you. You may get information where someone says something. You may get intuition about something. You may have impressions that show up about you. You may have things that occur in dreams, maybe even a daydream that gives you information about how you want to explore your life. There's many ways that you communicate with yourself. We suggest that if you follow those and live your life in a way where it's kind of an exploration of your life, what's going to naturally happen in that is any of the beliefs that are there that will be a little bit of a challenge, maybe we'll say, that inhibit you a little bit on moving into that place where you can make choices more freely and easily, will just naturally show up for you in your life. And at that time, you can identify what they are, and you can look at them and you can see how they affect your life, and you can begin to make choices beyond them. And there's many ways that you can help yourself do that. Many, many, many ways. And a lot of that has been shared with you through a whole variety of information that's out there right now. Some of the things we just spoke of can help you do that. Dream time is one of the things that can do that for you. Meditation can do that for you. Many, many things can do that for you. And so we would suggest to approach your life in that way if you can, to approach it as an exploration of the experience that you're having in front of you. And as you do that, those beliefs that are a little more constraining to your existence or the existence that you're moving into will just naturally show up for you. And you'll be able to recognize them in that regard. Now, that doesn't mean that in this process, and as you move into this process, you may not utilize, because at a certain point, that's what it will become. It'll be you utilizing beliefs to have a particular type of an experience. We've used this analogy before. It's kind of like walking into a very large walk-in closet and looking around at all the clothes that are there and going, these are the clothes that I would like to wear in this moment. And maybe you walk in a little later in the day and you change your clothes. It'll be very much like that. You use beliefs in that manner. You use them to allow you to express yourself in whatever way you want to, and it won't feel much as what it has historically, like they're the ones running the show instead, like you're being almost, the word ordered might be a little strong, but you understand it if we say it that way. You're being ordered to do something in a particular way, right? You're being instructed to do that in a way that doesn't really allow any space around it to be able to do it any differently. That has seemed to be your relationship so far historically, where less and less it's going to be like that. And in increasing ways, if it feels like that to you, you'll find yourself being less comfortable in those situations. That will be one of the things that will prompt you to begin to explore the beliefs that are influencing you in that regard, because it will not feel comfortable for you to feel hindered in your exploration. And you will find the things that bring about that feeling of feeling hindered will be things that you may be able to remember wouldn't have, quote unquote, earlier in your life. You may have had them be part of your life then, and you just accepted them as part of your life at that point. But you won't do that any longer. They'll feel different to you. They'll feel constraining to you where they didn't at one point in time. And you will want to move beyond them. So you will explore what's preventing you in that regard from moving beyond them. And you'll find out what that is. And then you'll allow yourself to do that. And so at this point, it feels to us like a good place to pause and to see as we express what it was that we did. If Lucy has any ideas, any questions, any ways that they think it would be nice to expand what it is that we've shared so far. So why don't you go ahead, Lucy?
Thank you. I'm curious what you would say in response to someone asking, if we have complete freedom of expression, wouldn't that cause utter chaos? Everyone doing whatever they want to do.
Well, from one perspective, it's very easy to understand that people would think in that direction. Because what you've done on your planet, again, historically speaking, is you've utilized your outer senses, and maybe we'll call it your logical, rational, intellectual approaches, your intellect, in a way to look around what you've come to understand is your life and to see patterns that you've recognized in it and behaviors that have ensued on your planet as a result of certain beliefs that you hold within you, beliefs of being harmed, beliefs of needing to defend, beliefs of what difference means. And there's many, many, many things like this. As you move forward, however, what's going to happen is that as your awareness broadens and your connectivity to each other becomes increasingly apparent to all of you, what you'll begin to understand is that there's a natural collaboration and cooperation that really has always been part of your experience here that you haven't recognized to this date. And it will become increasingly apparent to you as you move into this transition. And so, what will happen is that what everybody will do is they will choose the things that feel most natural for them to do as an expression. And many of those things will continue to be the things that people do right now anyway. It's just that people will do them because it's what they feel naturally inclined to do. You may be surprised that people might feel naturally inclined to want to scrub a bathroom, but there are people that are like that out there. Many, many things. And so as you do this, all of you will interact in a very natural way. You will all express yourselves in a way that's all collaborative and helpful to everybody else. And that'll occur in ways that right now can be difficult for you to envision, but it's what you're moving into. So you're not really going to have chaos in the way that people believe it is, because people believe right now that you need to control how things happen in order for them to happen in a beneficial way for individuals. But really, if you think about it, and I think everybody has had these types of experiences. When a particular experience is coming into your life, whether it's a relationship or a job or a friendship or whatever it might happen to be, there are always things that happen in your life that are part of that thing coming into your life that were surprising, that you didn't plan as this opened up for you. Those things are the part of the things that are a part of this whole process, and they're there actually all the time. You just really don't pay attention to them the way that you will learn to pay attention to them. And as your experience opens up, you'll understand that really all of your experience is that. And it's always been that. You've just focused on it in a particular way and believed that it happened in a particular way, when really there was more to it than what you were able to observe in that particular moment. But you will know it in an expanded way as this process opens up for you.
Thank you. I'm curious what beliefs would serve us best if we are trying to move into that understanding or experience of greater connectivity with others. A lot of people would like to experience telepathy, for example, but don't know how to do that. So, what are beliefs that could encourage more of that, the development of telepathy in people?
So, what we would suggest is the most powerful thing that you can do, whether you want to call it a belief or an action, is to attempt to connect with those deeper layers of who you are as much as you possibly can, to attempt to connect with you, to allow your own natural flow to move as fully into your life as you possibly can. Attempt not to control it. Attempt not to say that it should show up like this or it should show up like this, because if it doesn't show up like this, then I'm missing something and there's something wrong with my process. Attempt to allow your process to be your process. Eventually, what you will find is that all of these ways of information showing up for individuals will become part of your process. Some of those will be more powerful for you than they are for others. Different individuals will use different things in their process, but it's just like right now, you can sit down at a computer and you can type on a keyboard. You can pull up your mobile phone and you can type on the phone. You can call somebody and talk on the phone. You can speak to somebody in person. There's many ways of communicating in that regard, but they're all valid ways of communicating. The same thing is true with this process of getting to know yourself more fully, is that if you trust that the way that will work best for you will begin to show itself first, shall we say, and then others will flow in. That will be the easiest way for your process to be as smooth as it can for you. So the thing is to validate yourself, validate how your life is working for you, and don't necessarily look around at other people's lives and say that it should be more like their life in order for my life to be valid. This will allow you to understand your movement as full as you possibly can. It will bring opportunities to you that otherwise you may miss because you want your life to look in a particular way. So, for the fullness of this process to work for you in the best way it possibly can, we're going to suggest to utilize the belief that is about trusting in yourself and trusting in your own process, and just allow whatever that process to be what it is, because that part of yourself sees all of what your process can be and will bring your process to you in the way that will work perfectly for you. The key here is in your allowance for it to do that. And as you find yourself increasingly able to do that, you'll find that your process typically flows smoother. Now, that doesn't mean that within this process, you won't encounter the challenges of understanding what certain beliefs are. You will. But that understanding will come about in a way that will facilitate your movement through them much easier than if you attempt from a intellectual logical way to steer your journey.
Okay, thank you. Would it be fair to say that um, as a part of developing telepathy, we could actually reframe so that our own experience of our unity with our higher self is a form of telepathy, that we are already experiencing it anytime we feel the fullness of self, or the connectivity, the unity, that itself is telepathy. And so that's a practice ground in a way. Is that
Yes,
accurate
it's
or not quite?
you can do that. There's a number of ways you can, and that would certainly be valid. One of the things that we would suggest is, and of course, what we're speaking of here is information that shows up to you from the more expansive parts of who and what you are. And they, of course, show up in many, many ways. Telepathy, one of them, a mixture of telepathy and empathy. Yes. So, not only a somewhat psychological process, but a feeling process combined. Now, intuition is a lot like this, impressions are a lot like this. Imagination is a little like this and a little bit different, right? When you have images show up. If you understand that information is coming to you all the time, even through your physical media, and if you just begin to pay attention to what we may say are alternative stations of information as you go about your day, and as you allow yourself to pick up on those, and it can be in very mundane common experiences. We've used the experience of you may be driving down the road and get a prompting from within you to move into the next lane, and you either do or do not. And especially in these time periods, as you move into that, you may encounter the reason why you got that prompting shortly after you got the prompting, regardless of how you acted on it. And these little things can show up at any time in your life. You may be cooking and you walk away from the stove to pick up a phone that just rang, and you have a prompting again of some type to walk back over towards the stove. And maybe you disregard that because you're in conversation with whoever called you, right? And only a few moments after that, you hear whatever it is that is now boiling over on the stove, right? And if you would have followed that prompting, you would have walked over to the stove to see it's about to boil over and you could have acted on it, right? So there are many, many things that will happen to you in the course of your day, and they do actually all the time. And so as you increase your awareness of them, it's like it's almost as if you sat someplace in a setting that is familiar to you and you closed your eyes and you attempted to kind of reach out with your imagination or your feeling state or your mind, maybe we'll say, your consciousness, and and see if you can somehow have an awareness of where your couch is or where your TV is, or even the monitor that sits in front of you with your eyes closed. Practicing those types of things can begin to open those doors a little bit for you as well, because you're practicing with opening the doors to information in a way that you're not so used to interacting with information. You're used to what your eyes bring to you, what your ears bring to you, what your nose bring to you, what your sense of touch brings to you, smell, taste, things of that nature. Now, for the most part, everybody has those times where that little bit of intuition comes in and gives them a little prompting to do something. And they find themselves, and people call it various things. They call it maybe that gut feeling or whatever it might happen to be. Many names are applied to those things. And you act on those. And so many people know those experiences already. They may not only know that they can show up in many different types of flavors. And so you can become increasingly familiar with those flavors by, in fact, one of the ways, just by intending to become increasingly familiar with those flavors. You can, within your mind, suggest to the rest of you that's there that this is something that I would like to do. I would like to know, I would like to become familiar with these other ways that we're communicating that maybe I'm not so much paying attention to now. And they will provide for you in the course of your day opportunities, little events. Now, you may miss a bunch of them. You may catch none of them the first few days. Depends on where you are in your exploration, or because you've already explored a little bit, being able to pull in some of the additional stuff that you haven't quite done yet might not be quite so difficult for you. It really depends on where you are in your exploration. But there are many ways that you could do this. We'll suggest that this particular manner of interacting, telepathy, is natural for all of you. So eventually, all of you will utilize this particular manner of connecting with consciousness because it's one of the ways that you connect within consciousness. And you'll find yourselves doing it more and more. Good friends and people who are very, very close to each other find themselves doing this very frequently, where when you're in conversation with them, you'll bring them something as they're doing something, and they didn't ask for that pen or that fork or that whatever it is, that cup, but you had this sense of what they were about to do. Or you answer something as you're in conversation and they haven't finished the sentence yet because you already have an awareness of what it was they were about to say, right? You do this with people that you're very familiar with. So this is a natural part of your beingness already. It's already there. You'll just learn to use it more, but it'll be something that will happen naturally for you. And it'll occur for different individuals at different times and at a different pace, and in the weave of other forms of communication in a way that's unique to them.
Thank you. As we talk about our expanded sense of self, I'm curious if that includes for you guides and angels, ancestors, other beings of light that are in our group of helpers during this lifetime. And if
Absolutely.
you'd like to speak to that.
Yes, because this is your experience. When you look around at your experience, you experience it a particular way. And so, what you do when you have these types of movements or when you interact with these other portions of yourself, even when it hasn't been within the time period of this movement, you will utilize manners of communicating that make some sense to you, right? And you've many times created myths and stories about these particular ways that information show up for all of you. Things like the gods and the goddesses, things like angels, whatever you may have to say. And so, not only the rest of you, but all of consciousness, all of spirit, whatever you would like to call that, all of creation is, of course, aware. It is conscious and it is energy. And so, when those aspects of creation, and in the moment, we'll use this phraseology, that reside outside of your experience, choose to communicate with those of you who are within the experience, they, in a very aware way, will utilize the methodologies that seem to make sense to those of you that are within the experience. And they will provide for you, and you don't even realize that this has happened many times, little ideas about angels, about extraterrestrials, about guides, about whatever it might happen to be, right? Various symbols that you'll use to allow you to connect to the rest of consciousness through some type of vehicle that in that moment makes sense to you. And that moment seems to be a somewhat logical way that that information would show up to you. And this is something that's been done always in your reality. Of course, in this movement that you're all involved in, because what you're going to be doing is, in a sense, and this term is quite familiar, thinning those veils more and more and more all the time, those phenomenon will become more and more frequent to more and more people around your planet. And so we'll suggest to everybody who listens that try not to be surprised when your reality begins to become something very different, because it's going to become something very different. And you may not at sometimes know quite what to do with the way it just presented itself to you. But it wouldn't present itself to you in that way if that more encompassing you didn't know that you do have the ability to do something with it. You do have the ability to fold it into your experience. Now, it might be a little challenging at the time that it shows up, or it may not, depending on what your exploration is like right now. But it could happen like that. So, yes, so absolutely. All of those things, and even more things that you may not have encountered in your reality yet, will be part of the communication that happens between you and the rest of consciousness, as well as a part of this process of the unfolding that's going to happen with all of you.
Okay, so I think I understood you to have answered my question about guides and angels and ancestors as it's a belief system that that's who I'm receiving information from. It actually is simply all that is. Is that
Correct.
accurate?
It is
Okay.
consciousness. And of course, consciousness does express itself in many, infinite, actually, unique ways. And so those are some of the ways that consciousness expresses itself. Now, in other realities, those those ideas wouldn't even exist in the same way, because the reality itself is had in a very different format than the reality that you have created and are experiencing for yourselves here. And so those ideas would be totally different. The phenomenon that they would have as they're exploring themselves and whatever they're doing it would show up for them completely different in ways that maybe you can't even imagine from this experience. But yes, it's you utilize beliefs in that regard about the way, some of the ways that those parts of us that have no substance communicate with those parts of us that have substance.
Mhm. Could you give us an example of these other realms or other dimensions, other places, I guess I would say, where this belief in guides and angels wouldn't even exist as they explore themselves? Something completely different. What would be the completely different exploration there or
So,
imagination?
as we express that, in part, what we'll express is what your experience will move into. So, what you've done here is you've sequestered yourself, seemingly, very, very strongly from the rest of the knowledge of who and what you are, how you're actually able to create, how you are creating in this moment. And there aren't a lot of realities that do it as stringently, perhaps we'll use that word, as what you have here. In other words, you've done it fairly completely. So, in a reality, let's say, that has sequestered themselves a little bit from that knowledge, they would express themselves and interact with their environment around them, all of consciousness around them, in a very different way. So, let's say they may express something similar to water that you express on your planet right now, something that moves and flows. But perhaps in their reality, it's something that continually shifts colors, and as it moves and flows, perhaps it conveys a feeling state that radiates out of it and interacts with the individuals that are around it. And this is its natural state. Now, here, certainly, you can interact with water in various ways, shapes, and forms. And within you will arise certain feeling states, but it doesn't seem to you as it comes from the water. Yes? So, in one reality that exists, this is the experience that they have. The emotion flows from the water into their experience. And it's a very interactive thing, of course.
And is that happening because they believe that happens? And it would happen here if we believed the
It
same
doesn't,
way?
in this particular reality, they do not utilize beliefs. So it's just part of their reality. Here, you would frame it with beliefs around it. In other words, you would say that, as right now, you would say that if you were someplace in the wintertime and there was ice on the water and there was hole in the water, that when you put your hand in the water would be a particular state. It would be cold. And it would be your beliefs that would tell you that it was going to be cold because of the cues that you had around you, right? That you collaborate with those beliefs. Now, certainly, if you allowed a flexibility of beliefs, you could put your hand in that water and you could have it be whatever temperature you wanted to because that's your choice in the moment. You get to do what you want, right? But in this reality, you're still using a belief to say that because even the concept of temperature is associated with beliefs, right? Because you're configuring consciousness here, and as it expresses itself within a model that says that this particular media will express itself within this idea of temperature. And temperatures are an experience that you have here. And so, because they're an experience that you have here, there are ideas associated with them of how those experiences are had, in what situation those experiences are had, in collaboration with what other things going on those experiences are had. Beliefs do all of those things with you and for you in this experience. But there are, and we are quite aware that attempting to even imagine experiences that happen in other places that are not aligned with beliefs are something that is quite foreign to all of you because you are quite used to that influence in your existence with everything that you do. And it's so very woven into your experience that you really don't even pick it out as something that is an influence on your experience. It is just your experience. But in many, many, many other realities, most actually, beliefs do not play a part. They play a part in your physical dimension more prominently, actually, than in any other dimension that is created. You utilize them in a more strongly influencing way than any other physical dimensions.
So, what is creating the reality in those other dimensions where beliefs are not so prominent?
Just the flow of consciousness. Consciousness flows and moves and creates, and most of why and how consciousness flows and moves and creates has got nothing to do with beliefs associated with how and why it's doing it. It just is doing it. It just expresses itself in the way that it wants to express itself in a particular moment. And in most of creation, beliefs do not come into a part. They don't play a part in that continual creation and experience of creation. They are meant to be a particular flavor of your reality. They they allow it to be experienced in a particular way. It's as if you can drink water, let's say room temperature water, and have it just be water. Or you can put a cherry taste in it and now it has a different experience to it, or grape or root beer or whatever you want to do with it. It it changes the experience through a particular type of an overlay. That overlay is not utilized in many, many, many areas of consciousness. It's utilized in this one. And again, it is usually a very challenging thing to consider any experience without that overlay being part of it because it is so integral to your experience. It's foundational here to your experience, as emotion is foundational to your experience here. Really, every experience that you have has some type of an emotional component to it. You may not recognize that it's there, but if you contemplate it, there's a feeling state that's involved with it, always, whether you recognize it or not. It's foundational to the way that you have this experience in this particular physical reality. Beliefs are similar, beliefs are foundational. You will not leave beliefs behind as you expand into your new experience. You will use them in a very different way. You will use them in a very free and fluid way.
I'd love an example of that, please.
Our example of the water is a simple one. Right now, when you see those cues, you put your hand in the water, or you open your freezer, quote unquote, and you pull out an ice tray, and you expect, if you do it with your bare hands, that that ice tray feels a particular way. If you filled that ice tray and you put it in your freezer and you came back to your freezer 8 hours later and you pulled that ice tray out and you tipped it and liquid poured out of it, the thought that came into your mind would be, something is wrong with my freezer, because what's in here now should have a different form to it after this length of time. And time, of course, is part of this belief thing as well, right? And so you utilize beliefs that when this substance that you call water is in this environment that you call cold within a certain length of time, that it's going to change states, right? And these are all beliefs that you have, and you weave all these beliefs together to have then a particular experience within what you're doing here within this reality. And so usually you're not using one belief as you have your experience. Typically, you're weaving many together as you're having your experience. Like, there's a belief that you would have that, especially let's say if you're from more northern climates and you travel to a place close to the equator, and let's say it's in the wintertime for you in the northern climate, and you pull your clothes off and you walk around day after day out in the middle of the sun all day long, there's a belief you have that your skin is going to respond a particular way. And it responds that way because of belief that you have that you will become burned in that sun, because you have a belief that that sun is more powerful than where you were before, right? The experiences that you have are configured by the beliefs that you have about all things in your reality. And so you can pick and choose anything. There's nothing that you do in your reality that isn't influenced and flavored by the beliefs that you've woven through your reality here.
So let's say I'm walking in the sun and suddenly realize I didn't put on sunscreen this morning. I could utilize a belief that um, I'm in harmony with the sun and I'm not in opposition to it and I won't be harmed by it. That instead I will receive the rays of the sun with an open heart and will be finding myself all the more joyful. And that belief can play out as no sunburn, right?
You could. The question is, will you?
I
And
did that today.
whether that actually
Yes.
occurs or not will tell you how attached you still are to the belief that brings about the effect that you then experience. Now again, there's nothing wrong with the beliefs. There's nothing wrong with the effects that the beliefs bring about, have brought about. Again, what you're doing now is you're allowing more freedom with those. You can walk out in the sun. You will choose to use a belief that you'll either get tan or not. You may walk around for day after day after day and continue to be white like you've never been in the sun, because you will choose to utilize beliefs in a different way. Or you may choose to be burned because for some reason you want the experience of being burned, which may sound strange, but you still may want to experience that. And you'll
Or
certainly
we
be able to do that.
or we hold the belief very strongly that there are scientific facts
Yes.
and they're going to play out in our
Yes,
lives
indeed.
regardless of what we want.
Like your body scientifically responds a particular way. Food is an example, or other substances that you put into your body, medications. You put a medication in your body, you've had this idea in your society that's called science, medicine, various things. Beliefs are a part of those things that you explore them as you make them part of your experience. And as you create these things, you then attach to beliefs to how they function as you put them in your system. Now, there are many times when that happens, if people allow themselves to pay attention, where those effects don't happen at all. Also, is this whole idea of what you term within your society the placebo effect, where if you believe you're taking a substance, the effect actually occurs. Now, there are even more powerful things that are documented in your society that are integrated with how individuals believe or how you believe things can be. We'll give you one example. You have a phenomenon on your planet, a, a way of entitling an experience that individuals have called multiple personality, you call it disorder. When individuals will have more than one primary individual within themselves that comes forward and expresses themselves. You may have an individual with 4, 5, 6, whatever, different personalities within them that express themselves at various times as the primary personality. You have research now, and there's a bit of it, that shows that when one of those primary personalities shows up, that particular physiology has altered, and there are disease processes that are going on within that body. That when another of those primary personalities steps forward instead, that if they redo all of those tests, x rays, scans, whatever, that disease process does not occur there, is not in that same body as the primary way that that individual, that their personality expresses itself, moves either in the forefront or back. And these are things that you now have documented by individuals who've done research. And so again, you have belief systems that say that that can't occur. You have belief systems that are associated with your state of being, with this, with the state of who you are, how you express yourself as an a singular individual.
Mm.
And so this exploration that you are into will play into that as well, because what you will become increasingly familiar with is that you are actually many individuals. And even though you may still have one aspect of your personality that leads the expression, shall we say, you will be increasingly familiar with all of the facets of what you actually are within yourself, all the various ways that you're expressing yourself within, maybe we'll phrase it consciousness, just to make it easy for individuals in this moment. But an aspect of consciousness that's associated with your expression, you'll become increasingly familiar with all of that. People may call them aspects of themselves, probable thems, incarnational thems. Some use the term reincarnational thems, whatever. You will know all of these things as you, and you will have much more choice then in how you want to express yourself in any particular moment, because you will have so much at your disposal to utilize as you express yourself.
Beautiful. I'd like to go back just a moment to when you were talking about other realities in which the water changes colors and can imbue the individual with an emotion, a feeling. Could you name that place? Does it have a name?
We could create a name in the moment um, for a reference, how to express it, even because the expression that's utilized there would make no sense to you because the language is not configured in the way that you configure language here. However, key arrow, key arrow would be an intonation that you could associate with it. If you wanted to bring the flow of the actual experience, if you wanted to associate it with the flow of the actual experience, you could utilize that name as a doorway to the experience if you would like to.
Mhm. I do find it particularly interesting because just today I was swimming in the ocean and I found myself with all these wonderful emotions. And it hadn't occurred to me that they might be actually being imbued in me by the water itself.
What's interesting is that due to this transition period that you're all in, this shift in consciousness that you are all very much moving into and through, if you chose to, if you utilized your imagination, if you opened your aloneness, you could actually have an experience very much like that here in your own reality. There's nothing that stops you from doing that, actually, because as you move into the fullness of what you will know yourself as when this is, in that term, completed, those will be things you will be able to do. You will be able to visit other, maybe we'll call them in this moment, layers, dimensions of consciousness, and mix those into your experience in this place in whatever way that you want to. There will not be the delineations that you experience within your reality now. Now, again, that's not to say that there's anything wrong with the way you're doing it now or the way you have done it. You're just choosing to change it for yourselves. And how you will change it will be in a very expansive way.
Wonderful. Thank you. Is there anything you'd like to say as a wrap up for today?
All we would like to do, again, is just to remind you to, as much as you possibly can, trust in yourself, trust in your process. Understand that even though you've been exposed to maybe many experiences that may be challenging for you, that you do have the ability to move beyond those challenges. And in that, again, if you can, attempt not to attach any feelings of less than to yourself. Anything that expresses your worth in any way less than you are totally filled with worth, because you are. The rest of awareness already understands that. Sometimes the challenge is moving into a complete understanding of that yourself. But trusting in who you are and trusting in your movement from this place forward, allowing the information that can come to you in whatever way it would come to you, and allow it to make changes in your life in whatever way it will make changes, you will find will be a powerful thing that you can do in your life. And you will naturally move into this process. Attempt not to be overly concerned about how the process will occur. Just allow the process to be whatever it will be for you. And we will leave you with that.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.